With this, we are now moving towards the valedictory session. This session will be presided by Dr. Nagaraj Pathuri Garu, and we will begin the session with. I'm very pleased to invite Professor Balaganapathi, who is going to honor this program with his valedictory address. And namaste, Professor Balaganapathi Garu, and welcome once again. Professor Balaganapathi Garu is presently a professor of philosophy at University of Delhi. His research interests are in the areas of Indian philosophy, philosophy of religion, social and political philosophy, and philosophical practice. In addition to teaching and research, Professor Bala is a certified philosophical counselor by American Philosophy Practitioners Association, New York. Some of his publications include Philosophical Doctrines of Andhakas, exploring early Buddhist sects of Andhra, colonial designation of artificial legal entities, a post-Anthropocene dynamic jurisprudence, shifts in the classical Indian conception of philosophical practice, and so on. He's a project fellow of Great Transition in India, a Korean perspective on Indian studies by Institute of Indian Studies, Hankook University, of Foreign Studies, South Korea. He's working on a project titled Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata, the ethical value of societal and political well-being, and has completed a major funding research project for ICCR through the Labyrinth of Globalization, a study of popular imaginations and alternative narratives. Professor Bala guest edited the special issue on Indian perspectives on philosophical counseling for the Journal of APA, Philosophical Practice. He's been associated with various editorial boards of various journals such as Journal of Human Values, Journal of Foundational Research, University of Rajasthan, and so on. Professor Bala is presently a member of the Research Project Committee of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. He was a Chancellor's nominee for the Board of Management of Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur. He was the chairman of the governing body of Maitreyi College, New Delhi, and was a member of the governing body of Bhagini Nivedita College, New Delhi, for the year 2020-21. He was also a member of the review committee of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, constituted by Ministry of HRD, Government of India. We are so honored and thrilled to have the distinguished presence of Professor Balaganapathi, and we would, it's a pleasure to hear the valedictory address from him. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, namaste. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Shivkumarji. Deepa Kiranji, who is my friend from university days. Thank you so much, Deepa, for this invitation and also for this fascinating performance. That was wonderful. I have no words to appreciate the performance that you have given a few minutes back. And Shivkumarji, Dr. Nagaraj Pathuri, Mr. V. Srinivas, and other distinguished invitees who have joined us today, and performers, friends, and all those who have joined this program and enjoyed these 2 days of the conference. Namaste to all of you. I don't know how do I fit into this program, but organizers were very kind enough to extend this wonderful invitation to me. I'm saying this because how do we look at philosophy? There is a general misconception about philosophy, and some people may think that inviting a philosopher for such kind of wonderful gathering is a misfit. And I find myself to be a misfit, especially after Deepa's presentation. I don't know how to speak now. But let me just try to share some of the thoughts that I've gathered in relation to narrative tradition in general, and also in relation to the speaking and listening. that Deepa was hinting at. That I thought that's very fundamental to human nature, human souls. So I'll come to that a little later, but let me begin with this relation between philosophy and narrative tradition. Friends, as I said, there is a lot of misconception about ignorance and misconception about philosophy itself among the people. And whenever somebody says there is a philosopher, let's not bother to disturb him, let him leave, kind of an attitude that we have. There are, and also not many people choose philosophy for their studies. This is basically rooted in a kind of ignorance and misconception about philosophy. And this ignorance and misconception is in terms of understanding philosophy only as something related to religion. Okay, this is one aspect. But in fact, philosophy is not religion completely. Philosophy deals with religion as well as it deals with many other aspects of human nature and human cognition and human understanding. In fact, we have philosophy of mind and philosophy of mind from which the artificial intelligence, the whole concept of artificial intelligence has developed. So philosophy is not far away from what the fundamental technological revolution that you find around you. And also, people think that philosophy is away or philosophy is beyond this world. That is why we should not bother about it. But in fact, that is also a completely wrong understanding. Philosophy is very much rooted in this world, and it talks about the fundamental things, fundamental nature of the things that are around you, and also your own self. Okay. And the third one that people wrongly conceptualize philosophy is beyond the individual. I have nothing to do with it. It's somewhere metaphysical. I don't have to really care about it. But I strongly argue that each one of us have philosophy within us, and philosophy is like when you look at a computer, how does it function? It functions with various programs, right? Software programs. But it is not that programs can run on their own. These programs require operating system. And philosophy is like that operating system working within each one of us, which makes us to know other disciplines. So I would consider other disciplines, whatever, from chemistry and physics to social sciences or humanities that you talk about, all of them become possible to be a part of our knowledge system only because of the operating system called philosophy that works in each one of us. So how do I say this? When what do I mean? See, I try to always market my discipline. As a teacher of philosophy, I think that that's my duty as well, to market my subject, because I want many people to come forward and choose philosophy and do philosophy. And those who have chosen other disciplines also to know about philosophy, so that they can encourage their youngsters and others to come to philosophy. But let me begin this way. See, what is the fundamental thing for each one of us as human beings? Some people may give money, etc., as answers, but the very root of the concern of the human life is action. What to do? You're born and you're into a particular situation. You're always into a particular situation where you have to decide what to do, right? What is the right course of action? This is the problem for Arjuna, and this is the problem for many others, Dharma, Yudhishthira, and Rama, and for everybody. This is the problem. What to do and what not to do? Obviously, it includes what not to do, and also what is the right course of action for me. We can never decide that on our own, right? So what is the right course of action? Which means fundamental thing for human beings is human action. So how do I understand what is to be done, right? If we accept this to be the fundamental thing for every human being, whether you are a sociologist, scientist, or whatever, right? What should I do is the core. And if that is the case, what tells you what to do is the important thing. What tells you what to do in this particular situation, in this particular the given particular situation? It is based on your worldview that you have. Each one of us Okay, we have to choose for ourselves. The human action is to be chosen by your own self. So if that is the case, what is it that tells you what to do? It is your worldview and it is your belief system. Each one of us have our own belief system and worldview that determines what we can do, what we are supposed to do. Okay, so this belief system is very important, and belief system is not independent. Belief system develops a kind of worldview in us, and this worldview places every object, every relation, everything that you see around you in a particular system. Okay, let me give you an example. For example, 2 years back, I have organized a conference, international conference in Delhi University. I was heading the Department of Philosophy at that particular point of time. And there are scholars from UK and USA who have come here. And one of them happened to go around India and come back to the conference during the days. And he said, you Indians probably should stop organizing such kind of conferences, because there is a lot to do outside the conference hall than sitting in the conference and discussing these things. And he said, I went to various places where I saw a lot of dirt, and I see cow dung, etc. everywhere. Okay, and he spoke blah blah blah. After that, I told him, I responded to him. Okay, I said, looking at the things, looking at the objects and looking at the things is cultural. And for you, cow dung is something like shit. But for me, I was born and brought up in a village kind of a place. So I don't find cow dung to be shit, okay? Because I saw people smearing cow dung at home. So I don't find that to be that. In fact, I find that to be something auspicious and something that helps us in our immunity system and something that protects us as well. So I said, this is more cultural. You know, the perspective, the way you look at the world is more cultural, and that is how you have to be careful. Then I told him, you don't consider the digital waste, the waste which comes out of this mobiles, etc., to be real problem, and you dump it on the poorer nations, and we consider that to be nonsense, because that is not biodegradable, whereas whatever you think is shit can be biodegradable. So that's why I said it is all like you have a worldview that you have built, you have a belief system that you have built. On the basis of that, your human actions are determined, endowed. Okay, so now how do you build this belief system that you're talking about? It gets built in the process of your upbringing. From home, you pick up something, and in the process of interacting with the society, you develop your belief system. And in the process of going to the schools and educational institutions, unfortunately or fortunately, we pick up different kind of things as well, because as one of the speakers this morning was pointing out, we have been trained in an unfortunate kind of education system. I'm saying this, I am also a product of it, and most of us are product of this education system. But I can give you an example why I'm saying this unfortunate. This belief system, this education system into which we are all now, gives us a kind of binary epistemology. You know, what is this binary epistemology? It says there are opposites, right? We all know that there are opposites in the world. And when I say, what is the opposite of fire? Immediate answer will come like water. And when I say, what is the opposite of boy? Immediate answer will come girl, right? So all this we understand, because since school days, we are continuously bombarded and made to understand that there are opposites in the world. This is called binary epistemology. Okay, and this binary epistemology tells us that whole world is divided into two groups, and in order to understand one, you have to identify the opposite of it and understand the concept as the absence of the opposite. Okay, in order to understand, say, for example, masculinity, you have to identify the opposite of masculinity as femininity and understand masculinity as the absence of femininity. Similarly, femininity. Okay, so which means there is a kind of binary. See, this all of us know about this and we accept this, right? I'm telling you, this is all nonsense. Indian tradition never tells you that world is filled with binary epistemology. I can give you 100 examples. Let me start with the first one. Like I said, fire and air, fire and water, right? Indian tradition tells you that there are 5 basic fundamental elements: air, water, fire, earth, and ether. And these 5 fundamental elements are required and they are complementary to each other. They are never opposite to each other. They are never opposite to each other. They are always complementary to each other. And since they are complementary, how are they complementary? Since they are complementary, they are harmonious. And since they are harmonious, only when they come together, something new comes into existence. That is the point. Since they are harmonious, then since they are complementary, only if they come together, something new can come into existence. So everything that you see as matter is comprised of these 5 elements. Similarly, male and female, they are not opposites. They are complementary to each other. Something that one doesn't have, the other has. And when they come together, something new comes into existence, right? So this is what is complementary. This is what Indian tradition teaches us. But because of this school education system, whatever Western education system that we have adopted, we started looking at the world in terms of opposites. And imagine when you tell your younger kid that these are opposites, and when you tell them also how to deal with an opponent, what will happen? You will only find a society of violence, right? So this narrative is very important to me. Never teach your children that these are opposites, and ask them to understand that boy and girl are complementary to each other. Okay, only if you tell them this way, the world would be more peaceful for tomorrow and next generations at least. So please take care of that. See, this is with regard to the education system that I was referring to, but all these things, home, educational institutions and society develop our worldview filled with belief system. Okay, this belief system strengthens this worldview. And friends, in philosophy, we in general talk about something called epistemology, something called metaphysics, something, these two are fundamental. And what I told you is so far these 2 concepts. Okay, when we talk about epistemology, when we talk about worldview and belief system, that's what comprises each individual's metaphysics. And this metaphysics is constructed through the epistemology, the ways of learning, theory of knowledge. How do you acquire knowledge? You acquire knowledge through different means, right? So this process is called epistemology, and each one of us are endowed with this epistemological characteristic as well as metaphysics, which means worldview. This is what prompts you to act in the world, which means ethics that we talk about. Okay, so I came back to the fundamental question, fundamental concept of what to do, how to act, what is the right course of action. And the link between the metaphysics, the belief system, and what to do, how do I act in the world is language. And that's where the narrative tradition is very important. What tells you? What is it that tells you what to do? It is the language. It is the narrative tradition of your own culture that tells you what to do. Okay, that is how the narrative cultures, native narrative cultures, are very important to each of the civilizations. I'm not talking about India alone. I'm talking about every civilization, every culture. Unfortunately, some of the countries, some of the traditions, say for example, West has demolished its pre-modern cultures completely, classical pre-modern cultures completely. So they don't have roots to fall back. But fortunately, countries like India and China have this cultural roots in the classical traditions where they can draw the resources and develop. So that is how this conference that is being organized to celebrate the narrative traditions is very important, and it would be very useful to us. Coming back to just one more aspect of what philosophy is, friends, I'm sure most of the learned people here know it, but for the sake of other friends, I would say the highest degree that we talk about, philosophy is understood to be the foundational discipline. That's why I was saying it is the operating system. It is foundational discipline. That is how whatever subject that you pick up, whatever discipline that you pick up to work, the highest degree that is given is only PhD, and PhD is Doctor of Philosophy. So chemistry, it's degree of chemistry and Doctor of Philosophy, right? So basic final degree that is given is only in a Doctor of Philosophy. That shows the foundational nature of the discipline called philosophy. Let me come back to this narrative tradition that we are talking about. What is a story? When we talk about a story, there is a narrative tradition, a narration happening. And in the process of narration, how do we analyze this process of narration? There would be a speaker, as Deepa was presenting. Okay, she is the speaker and we are the listeners. And in the process, there is a content and there is an action as well that is happening, right? So this whole thing, the totality is understood to be the narrative. If this totality is to be understood to be narrative, the speaker, of course, is creative, and the listener is a learner. This is one way of understanding it. And in this framework, the speaker is said to be somebody who is giving, and listener is some to be understood to be somebody who is receiving it. But it is not just this. Okay, this is the basic fundamental elementary way of understanding. The speaker is a creative interpreter. Speaker is continuously a creative interpreter. At this, that's what when Deepa was explaining in terms of saying that she is also ready for something unexpected to happen. No, even if something unexpected happens, she is ready. No, it is the creative process of interpreting what she wants to present is always something that makes her exciting in the presentation. And in the similar way, the listener is also a creative interpreter. It is not that the speaker is a creative interpreter. Listener is also a creative interpreter in a narrative tradition. This is because when whatever it is intended by the speaker is not exactly getting carried to the listener, but listener also uses his own worldview, belief system to understand, receive it. So in the process, both are creative interpreters. I would, after some time, I would contrast this narrative tradition with a movie, because for me, movie is a dead one, okay? Because it already fixed what you have to think about. But narrative tradition is not fixed. It is always vibrant one, fluctuating and vibrant one, where both are interpreters, both are creative interpreters. And also in some of the, in movies, etc., only the speaker is the master. Okay, especially in the those who are interested in post-colonial narrative, people will understand that speaker is the master and listener is only a slave who has to listen. No, there is no other way for them. But in this narrative tradition, both are masters in the sense of both actively interpret what is happening and have their own understanding of it independently of the other. So that is how this narrative tradition is very important, and it plays a crucial role in nurturing the posterity. So why is it that the creative traditions, narrative traditions are developed? In order to nurture the posterity. How do you reach out to your next generations? How do you transmit the knowledge? How do you transmit the worldviews? How do you transmit the value system that you have developed so far to the next generations? Only possible way is through narrative. Okay, narrating the stories to them and telling them that, so that is how transmitting the knowledge to the posterity is possible effectively only through narrative traditions. That is how India has, and many cultural traditions have resorted to that. So having said that, let me just move to another interesting aspect related to that. When I said listening is the fundamental one, what do I mean by that? Even before a baby is born, even before we are born, the faculties, the sensory faculties also try to evolve within us. And science tells us that the first faculty of the fetus, that fetus develops is touch. Okay, but I would consider that it could be the listening. Okay, listening to the sound. Why is it so? I find that sound is something that that goes into the womb and reaches the fetus very effectively. Okay, the feeling of touch would come to them only after they come out of the womb. But when they are in the womb, when the baby is in the womb, in the form of a fetus, what is it that they actively get engaged with? What is it that they can identify is basically the sound, the heartbeat of the mother. Okay, that is how even after they come out, if they are if they are troubled, if the mother hugs, the baby listens to the heartbeat and she would be calm. She feels comfortable. She understands that she's in safe hands, right? So the sound is so fundamental, and this is understood quite well by these cultural traditions which have developed narrative tradition. Okay, so that is how, for me, sound is the very essential basic component of knowledge for the individuals. So which means even before you're born, you're acquainted with the sound. You're acquainted with the sound and you get tuned to the sound. That is how people often say that you keep talking to your baby in your womb, so that they tell mother and even the parents, even to the father, that you keep talking to the baby even if the baby is at home, so that the baby can get connected to you, all right, to the parents. So that is how even before your birth, sound is the one to which you get connected. And we have instances of that in our tradition, where Abhimanyu has heard the story of Padma Vyuha, that is being half narrated by Arjuna. Similarly, we also hear the story of Prahlada, who gets tuned to Vishnu Bhakti, right? So these two stories tell us, narratives tell us that even in the womb, the baby gets connected to the stories that are being narrated. Okay, so which means the baby also gets to develop its own senses, and also worldview, starts building its worldview and knowledge system, listening to the sound, listening to the music. So that is how narratives are so powerful, so intrinsic to the human beings. Okay, that's what I'm trying to stress here. It is not just that it is the primary faculty. It is also one of the first medium of learning for the individuals. Listening through sound, listening through narrative is the first learning medium for the individuals. That is the fundamental nature of sound. And in this process, what is also happening is, though the baby is in the womb, it is only through the sound that it is getting connected to what is happening outside the womb. So something that is not accessible to it, something that it doesn't know at all, it gets connected to that through the sound. So that this shows the fundamental, essential nature of the faculty of sound and the faculty of learning and building the knowledge system through the narrative. Okay, so that's what I thought is fascinating to have a look at. And also, when Deepa asked me to speak on this, since I am from philosophy, I thought I should bring something from philosophy. That's so. In fact, I thought of a title as well. Title that I thought of developing on is Shabda Pramana and Sravana as the foundations of narrative tradition of India. Friends, when we look at, I will not take much time. I'll take probably 10 more minutes and close my talk. As I told you, there are different ways through which you gain your knowledge. And Indian tradition, philosophy, in Indian philosophy, we talk about epistemology, I told you, the ways of acquiring knowledge, and that those are called pramanas. Pramana means the means of acquiring knowledge. There are different ways, different means through which we acquire knowledge. One could be by seeing, which is said to be pratyaksha, and one is by reasoning, anumana, and one is by upamana, which means comparison. But for me, the fundamental pramana is not by seeing. Especially for the Indian tradition, the fundamental pramana is Shabda Pramana, which is verbal testimony. They say you gain knowledge. Okay, one of the ways of gaining knowledge is by listening to the other. So you need not experience everything. Okay, you can gain the knowledge of the experience of the others, and that is how you can build your knowledge, right? And in this particular sense, Vedas, see, Vedas are not authored. They are understood to be apaurishayas, which means they are authorless. And in fact, Indian tradition doesn't believe in authorship at all. Knowledge is a community enterprise, and the community builds the knowledge system. And all of us contribute to the growth of the knowledge. And that is how we don't feel that we are the authors of it, okay? Because whatever you said is already built by somebody else on the basis of which you are extending it some more, right? So that is how the roots of what you say to be your authorship is already developed by somebody else. And it is on the foundations of that you are developing it, that is understood to be, especially the Vedic texts are understood to be apaurishayas, which means authorless. No, they are only heard by the rishis and transmitted, given to us. So this hearing, no, it's just listening. So the Indian knowledge system itself, no, the roots of Indian knowledge system, which takes us to Vedas, which are said to be only heard texts. Okay, the rishis have heard them, Vedic hymns, and then they have presented to us. Okay, so that's how Vedic tradition is called Shruti. Shruti, and that is how Shabda Pramana is very important in Indian tradition, which tells us that it is only by listening to the Aptavachana or to the Vedic text that you gain your knowledge. So this shows that this gives the primacy to listening. That the listening that Deepa was also stressing, deep listening, active listening is very important, and this is given a primary place in Indian tradition. On the other side of the story, Vedanta, most of you, or I'm very sure most of you are acquainted with Vedanta. Vedantic tradition, Advaitic tradition especially, Advaita Vedantic tradition tells us how do you learn something. It gives 3 steps of learning, methods of 3 steps of learning. They are Sravana, Manana, and Nitithyasana. How do you gain the knowledge of something? First, you listen to it. And merely by listening, do you get the knowledge? No. You may get acquainted with that, but you may not get the knowledge of it. So after Sravana, what is important is Manana. You have to repeat it within yourself, okay, so that you get acquainted with that. And then the third step is Nitidhyasana, which means you meditate on what you have heard and what you have repeated. Then it becomes part of your nature. Then you will understand, get the comprehensive understanding of the knowledge that you want to gain. So the first step that is stated is Sravana. Okay, It's not what you see, it is what you heard. What you heard is so important. That is how in the Indian philosophical tradition, the first place is to what you heard. So that is how I believe these two, Sabda Pramana and then Sravana, to be the foundations of the narrative tradition of India that we have. And in the process, what is happening is, as I said, one of the major concerns is what to do. Similarly, it is not enough if I can think of myself. It is also that how do I relate the other? Because I am not alone in the world. I am with the other. Other could be human other, non-human other, and a lot of other things, the spiritual other as well, cosmic self as well. So how do I relate myself? How do I conceptualize myself? And it is the narrative tradition which makes you to conceptualize the other in a harmonious way with yourself. This is the only one, okay? Because remaining everything, say for example, through perception, when you see things to be different from you. But when you hear and conceptualize something in the mind, okay, then the way you relate to the other is most of the times in a harmonious way. So that even in that particular sense, I believe the narrative tradition has a key role in building the self of the individual. Each one of us have our own individual self, and this is built mostly on the basis of this Shabda Pramana. The way we hear and the way we conceptualize the other is very important to me. In the afternoon, I was listening to another fascinating performance narration by Geeta Ramanujanji. I was like, she asked us to close our eyes and asked, she was narrating something and we were visualizing it, right? And I'm sure most of you might have really enjoyed the performance narration that she has given us. So what is it that it tells us? This is where I want to contrast narration with a movie. Movie is also a narration. Most of us agree with this. If movie is also a narration, for me, movie is a dead narration. Okay, it closes everything for us. But this kind of a narration where you just close your eyes and try to listen to the narration, and then you, as I said, actively involve yourself through this deep listening and develop your faculties. In the process, what is it that is happening? This narration invites us to become one with it, and it doesn't end there. Of course, becoming one with the narration is very important, and this is the beginning, and this is what in fact fascinates us. But becoming one with the narration is the first step, and it also transports us beyond our empirical self. Okay, whatever you may be at that moment, when you are into the narration, when you are listening to the narration, you get transported beyond your own self, right? So it makes us to be one with it, and it also asks us or prompts us to it transports us beyond our own self, and in the process, it also pushes us to creatively experience what is happening there. And this is what this is where I must mention this, friends. We go to the movies and they say 3D movies. And we also these days have 4-dimensional movies where you sit inside and they try to create a lot of things so that we can experience that. But we have stopped at the level of 4D, or sometimes you also have 5D, 6D. And in Delhi, we find up to 7D, 7 dimensions. But I don't know, somehow I couldn't enjoy that much. But when you listen to a narrative, okay, you go beyond these dimensions that are presented to be there, okay? Because when you close your mind, when you close your eyes and listen to the narration, you would be possibly going beyond these dimensions that are presented in the form of a movie. And in the process of that, what is it that is happening is you would be reaching to the potentialities, potential possibilities of going beyond these dimensions. That is very important to me. This is where, in fact, I want to refer to what Dr. Pradeep in the morning talking about. Okay, when he spoke about this Uni5 schools, he spoke about body, mind, and then individual awareness, and then the unity with the consciousness. Okay, so that is the unity with the consciousness is the highest one that he has mentioned. And that's where, when you reach that, you understand, you explore your potential possibilities. Each one of us are capable of reaching out, or each one of us possess potentially innumerable possibilities of observing certain things and conceptualizing certain things and enjoying certain things, experiencing certain things. And you would be able to reach them only through this narrative tradition. Remaining visual traditions that you have, they limit you, they stop you, they ask you to stop there. But narrative tradition, in fact, encourages you to be more creative, and that is how you become more creative interpreter of what is being heard. And that is how I believe that this narrative tradition opens our minds rather than closing them. And that's where I believe these narrative traditions are important for the transmission of the knowledge, worldview, and then the value system. Value system is very important to me, because that's what this value system is, the one which tells you what to do. Okay. And how do you nurture your generations? Nurturing the younger generations, you have to nurture the younger generations only through these narrative traditions. Only because we stopped nurturing our younger generations through these stories, because somehow the joint family system getting eroded, and then we are shifting fast to I don't know where, but in the process telling, building narrative at home is somehow missing, which has long-term repercussions on the younger generations. So I believe this conference really makes us understand the value of that, because I also heard a presentation by one of our friends on family stories, no? Narrating, building the family stories. This is very important. Otherwise, how do you get connected to your younger friends? No, this is very essential. And thank you so much for conceptualizing such kind of wonderful conference. And I really feel honored to be part of this event. And my sincere thanks to Dr. Nagaraj Pathuri and Deepa and Shivkumar and Srinivas ji for this invitation. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Professor Balaganapathi Garu. I think it was mesmerizing. You have in a way summed up the last 2 days and given it a philosophical grounding, and you've explained the philosophical importance of the narrative traditions. And not just that, you've also, kind of given the way forward. Why is it that we are doing all this, and how is it that we ought to carry it forward? When I was listening to you, I was reminded of one story which is there in the southern tradition of Mahabharata, southern recension of Mahabharata, but not there in the other recensions of the Vyasa, of the engagement between Vyasa and Ganapati. So Vyasa says, I need a scribe, and Ganapati is presented. Ganapati puts a condition that I will write only if you can match my speed. I mean, if I stop, if you stop and I'm done, I'll go away. But Vyasa then says, fine, but you ought to understand everything, internalize completely, and then only put it on the parchment. So that puts a different constraint. So it is in this engagement between the conceptualizer and the scribe. So before it goes on to the paper or the parchment, it has gone through completely, it has been internalized, heard, Shramana, Manana, Nididhyasana has happened completely within Ganapati, and then only it goes onto the parchment, which then gets Vyasa required time. So, it's a complex story where the the work itself is a result of this complex engagement. If Ganapati had not put that constraint, would Mahabharata have been the same? If Vyasa had not put that constraint on Ganapati, would Mahabharata have been the same? Of course, the story is not there in all recensions of Mahabharata, but it beautifully explains certain aspects of listening, internalizing, that is there in our tradition. So thank you so much for this, and I'm sure our audiences are eager to interact with you. Uh, feel free to ask your questions and get your doubts clarified, everybody.
Yeah, I think I see some observation somewhere
Yeah.
in the chat box by I think Rajneesh Chauhan.
Yes. Yes.
It's an observation that is made here. One can teach correct things, principles to their own children and their own folks, but problem arises when others don't teach their own those correct principles. See, this is the question that we most of the times we come across. Like, yeah, if you are alone doing it, it's not going to be uh, it's not going to make much difference, right? That is how all of us tend to disown this possibility of changing the world. We have to somewhere begin, and especially as teachers, especially I'm talking about my teaching community, it is our duty, because generations of students go from our hands, and you would definitely make an impact with your teaching and with your behavior in the classroom and outside the classroom. And students do remember, each one of us, we can always say, if I ask all of us, like, who is your favorite teacher? You can always remember one, right? And when you remember one, we can always ask the subsequent question, like, why do you like? There is a reason, right? And students definitely remember their teachers as they remember their parents. And it is our duty to tell them what is right and what is the right way of looking at things, conceptualizing things. As I told you, please be aware of this binary epistemology and tell your kids that no, they are not opposites, they are not binaries. Indian tradition clearly tells us that these are complementary, and complementary things contribute together. They come together and contribute to the new thing, contribute to a new thing. If something new has to emerge, these complementary things have to come together. So if we can tell them slowly, I think we have to begin. That's all. There is no other way. So it is our duty, right? So let us do our duty. Let us not worry about the duty of others, because in this present world, like, we are more rights driven world in which we are living. That is how we ignore our duty. If we do this duty as parents, okay, I'm talking about my teaching community now. I have moved to parents community, like, as parent. So it is our duty to teach our kids this. And if we teach our kids thinking that it is our duty, definitely we are going to make a lot of difference to the coming generations and future societies. So that's my concern. And
That's it.
yeah, I think that's the only one that I see here. Yeah, thank you so much, Shivkumarji. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Balaganapathi Garu. Once again, I think it was really an honor to have you, and I mean, I enjoyed. It was a story, to me. Your address was another form of narration to
I only forgot to mention one interesting and important aspect. These days, I am advocating something called philosophical counseling. I believe as human beings, we are not just biological beings, and we are not just limited to psychological being as well. And beyond that, we also have a philosophical self, okay, which holds both biology and psychology. And that's where we started looking at an interesting aspect called philosophical counseling. And even in this philosophical counseling, for us, narrative therapy is very important. And this narrative therapy, when I say, each one of us have our own narrative of ourselves. And this narrative of ourselves, when it is not in consonance with the world outside or with the narrative of others, we get troubled. And how to resolve that trouble, we don't know. And that trouble really disturbs our sleep and disturbs our life as well. How do you resolve that? It is better to speak to your philosopher. That's how these days you have forums called Talk to Your Philosopher. Okay, talking to your philosopher who is trained in philosophy properly would really help you. Okay, and this narrative, self-narrative of oneself and self-narrative of the other, if they are not in consonance, then always there is a problem. I'm saying this simply because you prescribe your certain kind of rules for yourself and you demand certain kind of behavior from the other, and they don't match all the time, and you get troubled by that. And who can tell you what to do, not to do? Actually, what a philosophical counselor does is, a philosophical counselor would enter into a dialogue with you, and in the process of this dialogue, you would realize whether your system is aligned. Okay, three things are important for us in Indian tradition: manasa, vacha, karmana. Your thought, your word, and your action. These three, if these three are not in alignment, you're sick. And obviously that disturbs your three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas that you possess. And also, if you go by Ayurveda, the kapha and three things that we talk about, they also get disturbed. Okay, simple thing is, your thought, your word, and your action have to be in consonance. They have to be aligned. If that is not the case, then it leads to wrong narration of yourself, which disturbs your composition itself. And unless, how do you realize that? Unless you enter into a dialogue with yourself, that is what we call introspection and discovery of yourself. This is what we call self-discovery, self-awareness, self-realization. And that's what resolves the problem that you think is more biological or psychological, right? That is where philosophical counseling works really well. And especially for the pandemic times, we could help many people around by offering philosophical counseling sessions. And it is not that you are a patient in philosophical counseling. In the process of counseling, you're only a person who wants to talk. That's all. Right? So I think in the process, like, narrative tradition is very important to us. That's why I got attracted to this conference as well. So thanks, my sincere thanks and gratitude to Deepa, especially because it is because of her that I'm here. Of course, the other organizers as well. But Deepa is the one who has got in touch with me. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.